"You don't deserve this success," my father, Robert, said during my graduation dinner. "Then let Joshua pay your bills," I replied while lifting my glass. I walked out, and that was the last time I ever looked back. I said it with a quiet grin, steady and sure. The kind of expression you give when someone finally proves they were never truly for you. After I lifted my glass, a stillness settled over the space. Maybe it lasted 5 seconds, maybe more, but it felt like everything froze just long enough for me to watch their reactions change in real time. The laughs cut off. The soft clinking of utensils stopped. My father, David, still gripping a beer bottle that was half gone, blinked slowly like he wasn't sure what he just heard. But I was certain of what I had said. For once in my life, I spoke without hesitation, and I meant every word of it. The event was meant to honor something important, my college graduation, and not just any school. I had made it through Oak Haven, one of the best public universities in the state. I had pushed through it almost completely alone. My tuition covered mostly through scholarships, part-time work, tutoring sessions that stretched past midnight, and early morning shifts at the campus cafe. It was tough, but I made it. And not a single person in my family had helped. Still, I invited them all. I spent nearly all of what I had left to book a restaurant patio, fill it with food, hang some decorations, buy drinks, and even hire a musician. Just a guy with a guitar and a voice that carried real feeling. I wanted the night to feel like something big, like a new chapter was starting. And maybe it was, just not in the way I thought. Everyone came, my mom, Susan, quiet but they're like always. My aunt and uncle, Linda and Richard, hovering between supporters and spectators like usual. My little cousins running around with balloon strings wrapped around their wrists. And my dad, Thomas, showing up an hour late, already tipsy, wearing a crumpled fishing shirt and that familiar smug look. Joshua didn't come. He rarely did. But somehow he still took up space. He was there in every story my father, Michael, told, especially the one that flipped the entire evening on its head. "You don't deserve this success," Michael said, standing like he was about to make a toast. Joshua did. He didn't slur the words. He wasn't laughing. He meant it. And those words slammed into me like bricks, carrying the weight of every year before that night. Right then, I understood something I should have known long ago. I had spent my entire life waiting for this man to say he was proud of me. He never would. So, I lifted my drink, acted like it was still a celebration, and said, "Great. Then he can start covering your bills, too." I didn't need to yell. Everyone heard. Everyone understood. A few even gave small smiles. Not because it was funny, but because they recognized the truth in it. I set my glass down, looked at my dad, Stephen, one last time, and walked out. No explanations, no hugs, no looking back. I didn't go home afterward. I couldn't sit in my empty apartment playing that scene over and over. So, I just drove. No idea where I was heading. Just streets and silence under streetlights. By midnight, I found myself parked at the edge of town up at Lookout Point, the spot where teens used to sneak away to feel like the world was small and they could breathe. I turned off the car and left the windows open. The cold didn't bother me. It kept me grounded. And all I could hear in my mind was that sentence. "You don't deserve this success." Joshua did. Success. The degree I earned after 5 grueling years. The job I landed after dozens of rejections and brutal interviews. The debt I avoided by skipping every night out and living off discount noodles. What had Joshua done that made him more worthy of that success? That question had haunted me for as long as I could remember. Back then, Joshua was always the one forgiven first, the one who got endless chances, the one who was praised just for showing up. He quit community college after 1 semester, and somehow my dad, Charles, still called him the smart one. I got my first job at 16 to afford my own clothes for school. Joshua was nearly fired from GameStop 3 times and still got told how proud they were of him for working hard. I never had actual proof of the difference in how we were treated. Not until my 3rd year of college. I went back home one weekend and noticed a paper sitting on the kitchen counter. It was a tuition statement. Joshua's name was on it, marked as fully paid. That was the first moment I had confirmation, not just a gut feeling, that the situation was just as unfair as I had always suspected. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to turn it into a conflict. I told myself maybe they couldn't support me because money was tight. Maybe they were doing their best. Maybe they assumed I didn't need any help. But hours before standing on that restaurant patio, hearing my dad, Paul, brag about the son who didn't even bother to come while completely brushing aside everything I had worked for, that crushed every one of those maybes. That's when I started unraveling the past. I pulled up old documents, replayed memories I had pushed down, and began noticing the pattern, who they stepped in to protect and who they consistently left to figure things out alone. It had never really been about financial limits. It had never been about who achieved more. It was about belief. And the painful truth was my parents, especially Paul, never believed in me. As I stood there staring out over the quiet city, I quietly whispered to myself, it ends now. I wasn't talking about that night's argument. I meant the fake smiles, the internal begging, the endless effort to prove my worth. I was done reaching toward people who never once reached back. The thing about growing up invisible is that you become really good at slipping out of view without causing a scene, even while carrying everyone else's weight. But something shifted inside me that night on the hill. For the first time, I didn't want to fade into the background. I didn't just want to leave the celebration. I didn't just want a break from my father's voice. I wanted space from the entire situation, from all of them, from the people I had spent years calling my family. For the longest time, I believed that if I worked hard enough, kept my grades up, landed the right job, eventually they'd recognize me, that something would finally click. They'd look up and actually see me. But that moment never came. And it's not like they were evil or cartoonishly cruel. That would have made it easier to leave. No, it was subtle. I simply didn't matter unless they needed something. My dad, George, needed help filing taxes. I was the dependable one. Mom had issues with her laptop. I was the one they called. Joshua smashed his car again. I was expected to give him rides to interviews he wouldn't show up for. It wasn't that they resented me. Resentment takes attention. They just didn't care. That realization stuck with me for several days after the gathering. I didn't answer any calls. I didn't reply to any voicemails. My aunt, Patricia, messaged me through Facebook saying Dad wasn't acting like himself that night and that he didn't mean what he said. Mom left me a voicemail begging me not to let one moment ruin everything. But it wasn't one moment. It was all of them. All the subtle digs. All the moments when Joshua failed and was told he was figuring things out. But when I struggled, I was told to be more mature. Like the time I tried talking to Dad about my future plans and he told me I was too much. Then later that night, he announced with pride that Joshua had started a band in the garage. A band that never even performed once. All the frustration I'd buried started bubbling up in pieces. Old memories that hadn't surfaced in years began coming back. Like the time I broke my arm in high school and still got blamed for missing sports practice. While Joshua flunked every class and was rewarded with a trip to Florida to get some rest. Or the day I opened my college acceptance letter and Dad looked at me and said, "Don't count on us to pay for anything." I wasn't counting on it. I never had. Still, I gave everything I could. My time, my money, my emotional energy, my silence. But at some point, I had nothing left to offer. There was no dramatic ending. No shouting, no emotional meltdown, no final speech. I simply stopped. I stopped reaching out. I stopped replying. I stopped holding on to hope they'd change. They had always wanted me to be someone I wasn't. The quiet helper, the dependable sibling, the person clapping quietly from the sidelines while everyone else took the spotlight. And I played that part so well for so long, I almost forgot I could walk off that stage entirely. The choice didn't come with some big emotional breakthrough or dramatic background music. It showed up on an average Tuesday. Nothing special about it, just a plain dull Tuesday. 2 days after the party, I rolled out of bed, brewed some coffee, sat at the small kitchen table in my one-bedroom apartment, and stared at the photo from my college graduation. The only picture I'd asked the waiter to snap before I left the restaurant. You can see others in the background laughing, plates still full and a balloon frozen in motion. But I wasn't looking at the party. I was looking at myself. I didn't look proud, not even relieved. I looked drained, like someone who had carried a load for so long he forgot it was okay to set it down. That's when I picked up my phone, not to send a message, not to make a call, to block. First my dad, James, then my mom, Patricia, then Joshua, then the group chat that only remembered I existed when someone needed a ride or had forms they didn't know how to fill. One by one, I shut them out. No dramatic exit, no vague online post, no goodbye speech. I simply turned down the volume. Then I started boxing things up. I'd stayed in that apartment out of routine. It was close enough that I could be there if they needed something, but distant enough to feel like I had boundaries. But it never truly felt like mine. It was a holding space, a place in between trying and giving up. And I was tired of waiting around. I sold off most of my things on Facebook Marketplace. Put the cash toward clearing my remaining student loans. Handed the lease to a coworker who needed a place. Within 2 weeks, I was gone. New apartment, new city, new phone number, no goodbyes, no explanation. The only personal thing I took, aside from my basics, was my diploma. I had it framed. I hung it on the wall above my desk, not to impress anyone, not for inspiration, but to remind myself I did that alone, that it counted. Even if no one acknowledged it, even if my dad, Robert, stood in front of everyone and pretended it meant nothing, I was still here, still upright. And for the first time in my life, I felt no guilt. That's when the truth hit me. They hadn't simply skipped my wedding. They had made a choice. And now, finally, they were paying the price. The silence that followed wasn't regret. It was desperation. By the second week's end, whispers started reaching me. Not from my parents or my sister, but from shared acquaintances, old neighbors, even one of my dad's past coworkers. People asked strange questions. Was everything fine? Were the rumors accurate? Had my dad stepped away from the business? Had my sister quit school? Had something gone wrong at my wedding? One man even wondered if I was ill. It was clear they had already begun spreading their side of the story, that I was selfish, that I had cut them off because of one small family gathering, that I had betrayed my dad and taken the company. That word kept surfacing, taken. What none of them understood were the facts, the signed documents, the email records, the months of silence leading up to the wedding, the cruise they went on, the champagne toast raised without me. No outsider ever sees the whole picture. And I wasn't about to explain myself to every single person who had overheard my mother crying in public. Something had changed. They weren't fighting to come back anymore. They were fighting to protect their reputation. Then the unexpected happened. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after the last phone call, someone knocked on my front door. Not pounding, just a single knock. I checked the camera and felt my chest tighten. It was my sister, Ashley. She stood there by herself, soaked from the rain, holding a closed umbrella and a backpack. I hadn't laid eyes on her since the week before the wedding when she swore she couldn't wait to meet Beverly's family and promised to help us with preparation. After that, she disappeared. I opened the door. She stayed silent at first, her hair dripping, her shoulders stiff. Then she handed me a sealed envelope. "I'm not staying," she said. "But you should read this." Before I could speak, she turned and walked away, heading into a car I didn't recognize. Inside the envelope was a printed withdrawal form from her university. One single page. She had formally left school. No dramatic goodbye, no long message, only one handwritten sentence at the bottom. I didn't know what they were planning. I just went along with it. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time staring at that paper. It was the first time anyone in that family admitted anything close to the truth, that they knew that it wasn't an accident, that it wasn't bad timing. It was deliberate. Later that evening, Beverly found me standing in the yard. She asked if I was okay. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I told her about the envelope, about my sister, about the line at the bottom. Beverly said only one thing. "You don't have to fix this." That stopped me cold because for the very first time, I believed it. I didn't have to be the peacemaker. I didn't have to clean up their mess. I didn't owe them another chance just because we shared blood. And in that moment, something inside me finally let go. After leaving that envelope, my sister never contacted me again. No texts, no emails, nothing. Part of me expected her to eventually ask for money, maybe to cover debts she had built before dropping out. But the silence held. This time though, it felt different. Less like manipulation, more like surrender. It seemed they finally understood. The financial help, the open doors, the safety net. It was gone. Beverly's family, meanwhile, stayed constant. Her mom called every few days to check in. Her dad invited me to lunch just to talk about work. Before the wedding, I always felt a little out of place with them, like I didn't fully belong. But after everything, it became obvious. They saw me clearly, not for what I had lost, but for how I carried myself through it. Then late one night, I received an email from a debt collection agency. It was addressed to my parents, but copied to an old business account of mine that I had shut down months earlier. An account my dad must have used on a loan application. The email was direct, final notice. Over $68,000 owed. Something about house renovations, personal credit, and a business line that no longer existed. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the attached file. The next morning, a text arrived on my phone from my mom. The first in nearly 3 weeks. "Can we talk? It's serious." I ignored it. That day, my dad didn't appear at my house. Instead, he showed up at one of the job sites where we were working for a client. From the office window, I saw him across the lot chatting with one of my employees like they had known each other forever. When I walked outside, he forced a smile as though nothing had happened, as though we could simply continue where we had left off. "You've made your point," he said. "But we've got expenses now. I doubt you want your sister to sink in all this." There it was again. His usual trick, dressing manipulation up as concern and guilt. I asked him only one thing. "Are you still telling people I stole the company?" He turned his eyes away and stayed quiet. I gave a small nod, went back inside, and told my project manager to watch over all equipment carefully just in case. During the week that followed, pieces of news started coming in. Someone from my sister's former university mentioned she had been flagged for unpaid housing fees. My parents had begun renting rooms in their house again, something they hadn't done in more than 10 years. My mom even wrote in a local Facebook group offering homemade dinners for $12 a plate. Then I heard the detail that confirmed how far they had fallen. My dad had accepted a night manager position at a nearby auto parts store. The man who once boasted about our empire, who claimed we were a family legacy, who skipped my wedding to raise a glass on a cruise, was now breaking down cardboard boxes at 1 o'clock in the morning behind a counter. They didn't lose it all in a single moment. It slipped away little by little, the same way they tried to strip things from me. I didn't laugh. I didn't cheer. But I also didn't lift a finger to help. When everything finally collapsed, the money gone, the silence heavy, the debts piling up, they quit trying. No more calls, no lawyers, no sudden appearances, no messages delivered through neighbors or friends. My parents were too busy trying to keep their heads above water. My sister erased herself from social media. One day she was posting dorm selfies. The next she had vanished. I assumed she moved back into their house, but I didn't care enough to check. Beverly never pushed for details. From the first time she met them, she sensed the problem. My parents hardly acknowledged her. At our engagement dinner, they complained more about the location than they did talking to her family. Her mom still remembers how uncomfortable it was. Beverly stayed back, not because she was bitter, but because she respected herself. She gave me room to deal with my family on my terms. But after that final collapse, the debts, the odd jobs, the unraveling, she changed, too. She no longer treated them like fragile glass. One night, while cleaning up dinner at her parents' house, her dad told a story about building his first home. Her mom laughed so hard she nearly cried. I sat listening quietly. Beverly leaned close and whispered, "This is what family feels like." Those words struck deep because she was right. Her family had been there for the wedding. They stood beside me during the chaos that followed. They never asked me for anything. They didn't keep score. They didn't trade my vows for a vacation. They simply showed up. Meanwhile, my own family lost the business, the money, and the future they believed I owed them. They had bet everything on the idea that I would always forgive, always pay, always be the responsible one. But when I stopped, when I forced them to see the truth, they had nothing left. I never went back. I never called. Not when I heard they were renting out their basement. Not when I was told my dad's car had been repossessed. Not when my sister posted a vague quote online about hard lessons. Eventually, they disappeared from my life completely. Not in some dramatic moment, just entirely gone. I sold the old office building, rebranded the company, and bought new property with Beverly's father. He now sits on the board. Strange how things turn out. The man who once looked at me with doubt has become the closest thing I've had to a father in years. Last week, Beverly and I had dinner once more with her parents. During the meal, her mom handed me a wrapped box. Inside was a framed picture of the four of us at the wedding. The moment where for the first time in a long while, my smile felt genuine. Beverly rested her head against my shoulder and whispered, "This is where we start." And it was true. Life was beginning again without my parents, but never in loneliness. The next stage came a month later. The quiet stretched on, long and hollow, like stepping into an empty hall. Nobody wanted to enter first. I assumed that was the end. They had chosen their side. I didn't expect them to change. I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. Life pressed forward. Beverly and I began making plans for a short trip to the coast. Something light, something to clear our heads before opening the next chapter of the business. Then, completely out of nowhere, a letter arrived in the mail. Not a text, not a call, a real paper invitation. It was printed like a rehearsal dinner announcement or a local fundraiser. My full name was written clearly, framed in gold trim. There were no explanations, just a day, a time, and the name of a restaurant my parents used to take me to when I brought home good grades. I showed it to Beverly. She asked if I wanted to attend. At first, I said no. Then I thought about it longer and said maybe. I wasn't searching for forgiveness. I only wanted to hear what excuses they would offer now that everything had collapsed around them. So, I went. It was only the three of them, my mom, Diane, my dad, William, and my sister, Megan. When I walked in, they were already seated. The three of them stood up together like actors in some stage advertisement for family reconciliation. Diane wrapped her arms around me as if nothing had happened. William pulled out a chair for me. Megan's smile tried to look natural, but it wasn't. We sat down for 20 minutes. It almost seemed ordinary. They asked about the company, about Beverly. William bragged that someone at his country club had told him we were thriving. I let him talk. Megan mentioned she was applying to community college, trying for a new start. I nodded politely. Then everything shifted. Diane began talking about how hard the year had been on them, how quickly things had fallen apart, how they had made mistakes but didn't deserve to be treated like outcasts. Then she started in on me, claiming I'd always had life easier than they did. That I never understood what they had sacrificed to get me started. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I looked at her directly and said, "Do you think this was easy for me?" The table went silent. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't caused a scene, but I made myself clear. You skipped my wedding. You lifted glasses on a cruise while I stood at the altar without my family. You never called. You never sent a message. You clicked like on a Facebook post. And after that, you tried to claim what you never earned. None of this was easy. William shook his head slowly like I was being unfair. You don't have to keep punishing us, he said. That single word, punishing, told me everything. They still believed they were the ones being wronged. They thought I owed them. They thought I was cruel for finally setting boundaries. Megan leaned back, arms folded, her eyes wet as if my honesty had wounded her. Wounded. They had twisted the entire story inside their own minds. I pushed my chair back. No yelling, no dramatic exit. I stood and said, "There's nothing left to discuss." Then I walked out. This time, nobody followed. When I got home, Beverly didn't ask a single question. She saw the look on my face, walked over, and held me. That was it. The real ending. No more dinners, no more attempts, no more family that only appears when the money's gone.